Hi everyone, sorry for that delay. We were having some technical difficulties. I'm glad to see so many of you here. We are excited to get started with our webinar. Your next move, steps you can take to prepare yourself for the next chapter in your career. So we're excited that you all are here. Whatever the reason you are returning to the workforce, whether you took a hiatus to care for your children, or perhaps you are providing elder care. Maybe you're finishing school or transitioning from one role or looking for something new. We hope you find this as a helpful resource to get organized and take on future challenges. First, a little housekeeping. This is hopefully going to be an interactive session. At various points throughout the presentation, we may recommend writing something down or ask you to participate in a poll or comment on a subject. Participation is totally 100% voluntary, but hopefully we will all benefit from some knowledge sharing. We hope to have time at the end for questions. Feel free to write the questions in a question box you'll see in the little webinar box on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer them all. We'd also like to offer each of you a resume review session and a LinkedIn profile review after the presentation. So we'll send a follow-up email, and Allie, one of our speakers, will give you instructions on how to do that at the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Jenny Hux. I am head of marketing at SELA. I am a former recruiter, and I used to lead SELA's East Coast recruiting efforts. So I have a lot of experience in helping people find jobs. I work out of our DC office, and feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And we'll share our names again in a follow-up email. Just let us know you attended the webinar, because we do get connection requests, but we want to make sure that we do accept your invitation. Amy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Amy Tercinov. I've been with SELA almost 10 years. I have about 15 years of recruiting experience and 7 years in a project and program management and business analysis types of roles. So looking forward to helping you today.
Allie?
I'm Allie Pickett. I'm a recruiter here at SELA, and I've been here just a little over 2 years. In my previous life, I lived in DC and was a recruiter in the higher ed and academic space, and also looking forward to helping and hopefully giving some good takeaways in today's webinar.
Great. Thank you, Amy and Allie. So I'm just I want to introduce SELA real quick and tell you who we are. So we are a management and technology consulting firm. We have offices in Seattle, Washington, Shelton, Connecticut, and Washington, DC. And we've always valued our recruiting process and have taken a lot of pride in how we approach it. And we're proud of our ability to hire people that have the same values as us as an organization. One of our values is realizing significance, and we want to help others realize their significance as well. And we thought one way we could do that was to help our community, was to guide people like yourself and help you guys find meaningful professional experiences. So we're hoping this is going to be a part of that process. As we get through today's presentation, we're going to approach some situations from the lens of working at a consulting firm, because that's what we know really well. However, we've tried our best to offer a broad advice that will apply to any professional industry or domain. So we expect there to be lots of takeaways for you today. And today we hope you can break down the job search process into bite-sized actionable tasks. So we're trying to take this big scary process and kind of break it down for you. All right, so what are we going to do? So we've broken the presentation down into 4 phases: exploration, resume development, interviewing, and decisions. We'll also end the presentation today with a Q&A session. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off today with the exploration phase. If you're here today, you are committed to considering returning to the workforce. Doesn't mean you're going to go find a job tomorrow or next month or even later this year, but it is good to start thinking about what steps you need to take if you do want to do that sometime in the future. In this phase, we're going to look at how you can take inventory of your skills, maybe what you've done over the last few years away from the workforce, and consider how to put all that together as you pursue new opportunities. I'm going to share a quick story with you. I had the honor of hearing Guy Raz speak in person. He's the host of the podcast, How I Built This, on NPR. If you haven't heard it, it's great. It's always really inspiring. He spoke at an event at our company 2 years ago. He told us a story about the founder of the Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams Brewery being part of that company, Jim Cook. And when he was starting Sam Adams, Jim Cook debated whether he should leave his nice, cushy, comfortable job. And he told Guy Raz that there are plenty of things in life that are scary, but not dangerous. And there are plenty of things in life that are dangerous, but not scary. So keep that in mind as you go through this process. It may be scary to jump back into the workforce if you've been out for a while, but it probably isn't dangerous. But sometimes it might be uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind. And as we kind of go through the process, there's some other things we want you to keep in mind and consider. So as you are considering re-entering the workforce, know that you are not alone. There's several of you here today. And according to research, nearly 1 in 4 adults have stayed home to take care of a family member or taken other reasons to leave the workforce for an extended period of time. Something else to consider, if your decision impacts others, be honest about your intentions. Have a heart-to-heart with your partner, your kids, your parents, or others about your decision to return to work. Determine how they can and will support you through this transition, and then how you can help and support them through the transition as well. Also, as you start considering re-entering the workforce, start to seek growth opportunities that can help boost your resume and skills. We'll discuss that further, but maybe you want to take an online class or start reading some books to kind of re-up some of your skills. And lastly, be open to new experiences. The reality of re-entering the work world is that you might have to make some compromises. Be open to part-time or project or contract work if that's what's right for you right now. These short-term jobs often provide great experience and contacts that help you can land that perfect job that might be a fit for you later, and all the experiences that you bring to the table. So there's lots of things to consider as you're kind of going back to the workforce. And one of the things we want you guys to start to think about are your strengths. So if you've been out of the workforce for a while, it's a good idea to relook at what your strengths are. Having this self-awareness will help you as you move through the process. There are probably many strengths that you have probably gained while you've been away from the kind of a professional setting. Perhaps you've improved your time management skills, or maybe you're more empathetic, whatever it might be. So understanding both your strengths and your weaknesses is essential for self-development and personal growth. And it's also going to help you really narrow and focus your job search when you get to that point. So go ahead and take a look at this list. And I want you to go ahead and write down, if you have a piece of paper or on your phone in the notes section, wherever, go ahead and jot down 3 strengths that maybe you see on this list. Feel free to add something that maybe is not included. We just kind of tried to add a swath of different options for you guys. So go ahead, I'll give you 30 seconds or so to think through this. And then we'll kind of continue the presentation. So go ahead and, yes, I'm just gonna add some music, but I think you guys might want some quiet. Okay. So hopefully you were at least able to identify 1 or 2 or possibly 3 strengths here. For myself, I chose energetic, loyal, and team-oriented. So just keep those in the back of your head. Keep the piece of paper handy because it'll be useful a little bit later. All right, so let's say you went through that presentation and maybe, or that exercise, and maybe you found it hard. You weren't sure kind of what your strengths were, or to narrow it down, or maybe to think about it, maybe not in your personal, like maybe you have personal strengths, but your professional strengths, what would those be? There are several great resources on the internet to help you identify your strengths. At CELA, we've done a lot with the first 3, especially Discovery Insights. All new CELA employees go through Discovery Insights, and this is a great self-awareness tool that we can use to learn more about ourselves and our teammates, so we can understand our strengths and our teammates have, strengths and weaknesses our teammates have, and how we can work best with them. I recently did the Clifton Strengths strength assessment and thought it was really great and super helpful. So I definitely recommend kind of taking a look at that. We have an email going out to you and then resources at the end of this presentation that will kind of link to all of this information for you too. We've also included in this list, if you understand your strengths and things that come easy for you, it often opens up ideas about what kind of role you might be good at and what components might be a good fit for you in your day-to-day job. For example, if your strengths lay in being analytical and an independent worker, we don't recommend you apply for a role that takes you away from that focus. So managing and leading 20 people might not be the best fit for you. So remember, when you're putting your strengths together, don't choose attributes that you want to have. Choose those which really represent you and what you are able to offer to others. During this process, it's equally important, though, to know your weaknesses as much as knowing your strengths. You know, everyone always hates that interview question, like, what's your weakness, right? But it's still good to be aware of what they might be. Weakness areas are areas that you do have the power to improve, though. So once you're aware of what they are, you can build a self-improvement plan to possibly even make them a strength. So we highly recommend spending some time at the beginning of your search, or the beginning of this entire process, identifying those strengths, especially because you may have built those new strengths in your time away from the workforce that you might not have even been aware of. We had one colleague who took the Discovery Insights, and then she took it about 10 years later after she became a mom, and some of her strengths and awareness issues had shifted, which kind of she hadn't really expected. So it was a nice kind of learning opportunity for her. Great. So something else with your strengths in mind, we also think it's important that you identify what's important to you. You know, here's a couple examples. You know, our benefits, childcare, your commuting time, your compensation, the type of work you're doing, what kind of growth opportunities. Do you need to work from home? All of these points will rank differently for each of you. So the clearer you are with what you desire, and the easier it will be for you to focus on the type of role or company you want to work for and then eventually apply to. So maybe you prefer working for a small company or a large company. Do you want to work in an environment that's more relaxed or formal? Do you want an inspiring management team? Does the dress code matter? Are the people welcoming and friendly? For example, if working from home is really important to you, especially in these COVID times, maybe applying to remote only positions makes sense for you right now. In a follow-up email, we'll share a worksheet with you that helps you prioritize these that we've used a lot with college recruits, like college kids who are graduating. That's been really helpful for them to kind of really prioritize what they want in their career and their next role. So you'll see that probably sometime tomorrow. Then as you kind of continue to go through the process, you've identified your strengths, you kind of have an idea of what's important to you. It's important to think about the type of role you want to apply to. In our world, in consulting, we see a lot of full-time employees. We work as consultants. We have contractors. But it's important to think, what kind of roles do you want to apply to? So let's say you only want to work 20 or 30 hours a week. Consider that maybe you should start applying to part-time positions. This way you can get your foot in the door, you can get some updated professional experience, or maybe freelance work will meet your needs at this point in time. By identifying the type of role you want, it will be easier for you to search for the jobs that are right for you right now. And just know, like, you don't have to be at this job forever. It can just be, a nice transition back into the workforce. Goals. So once you've identified your strengths and what's important to you, it's a good time to start thinking about some short-term and long-term professional goals. There is so much to be said about goals. You can read blog after blog about goal setting. You can get journals that help you identify and track your goals. You can read books about it. But we're going to keep it pretty simple in this presentation. Do you have goals? Do you know what they are? Do you know how to make goals? Do you have a goal for next month, for next year? Do you have a 3-year goal plan, a 5-year plan? What are your aspirations, right? What are going to feed into those goals? We always recommend starting small with something like bite-sized and manageable. We're actually doing some internal training, and we had an exercise we had to watch yesterday on LinkedIn Learning, which is a great place to build skills that I think we're going to talk about later. But it says really create those short-term manageable goals. So if you haven't built or identified goals recently, I want to introduce you to an acronym called SMART. We use this a lot at CELA. I found this particular graphic on Indeed, and it pretty much said exactly what I wanted to say, so I didn't recreate it. But basically, you use this acronym to create like a goal. So you want your goal to be specific. You want it to be, especially for like job search, you want it to be very specific and narrow, so you can plan, in the search process. You want it to be measurable. You want to know if you are making progress on it. You want it to be attainable. You don't want it to be so far reaching that you're always disappointed that you're never meeting that goal. You want it to be relevant. You want it to be relevant to finding a job. You know, just because you set a goal that you want to, I don't know, learn something that has nothing to do with maybe your career, that might not be a great career setting goal, but it could be maybe a personal goal. And then time-based, make it so it's manageable and something that you can kind of build on and kind of achieve other goals. So go ahead, take a minute, and oh, you know what, I'll give you an example first. So an example of a SMART goal that I kind of came up with, that in the next 2 weeks, I want to identify 10 companies that offer remote financial analyst positions. So it's very specific, it's time-bound, it's measurable, it's relevant to my search, and it's specific. So go ahead and spend a minute. I want you to go ahead and think of what's a goal that you can accomplish in the next month, and use the SMART acronym. And sometimes I might use like 4 out of the 5 letters in a goal, but do your best. Go ahead. I'll give you kind of another 50 seconds or so to try to write a goal that you can accomplish in the next month. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap that up. So, and if you didn't get to finish, I definitely recommend maybe after the end of this presentation to come back to that. So then you have something actionable that you can take away from today's presentation that you can accomplish in the next, week, 2 weeks, month, whatever kind of, time-based section you set. And then when you accomplish this goal, you'll just be one step closer to meeting that overall goal of reentering the workforce. And then hopefully that goal will build on, you can add another goal on top of that. So lots to kind of accomplish there. But SMART's really good. And you can go read a ton of blogs on it. They have it, from how you can use it in marketing setting or an engineering setting or in the career search. So definitely do some research and reading after this presentation on SMART goals. Great. So as we look back at the exploration phase, we know we need to identify our strengths, but we need to identify what's important to us and then set some goals for ourselves. So with that all in mind, we want to start to build a plan. So try to set some time aside for yourself each day, week, month, whatever kind of the timeline you're putting yourself together to work on your job search. I know this is hard, especially with COVID, if you've got kids at home, if you're a virtual school teacher now, whatever it may be, but try to schedule some time for yourself. I know sometimes easier said than done, but do your best. And start using those SMART goals to set targets. So find a few companies a day, apply intentionally for X number of jobs by the end of the end of the week. Don't just do mass applies, but identify, I want to apply to 3 jobs per week. But set those SMART goals up to help you kind of keep yourself on target. Start to lean on your network, and we'll dive more into this in the next section. Are there friends who can provide you with referrals? Friends of friends, maybe start reaching out to those people. There's a lot to say. It's all in who you know, especially when it kind of comes to the job search. Another thing you want to kind of build in your plan, start identifying potential employers. Again, you're not committing to anything, you're just kind of seeing what's out there. Once you've targeted a few companies, write down the why that drew you in. In one of our research sections, we have a book by Simon Sinek. He's very often a TED speaker, and he's got a good thing about the why. So I definitely recommend you checking that out later. But was it their values, their mission, their community involvement? What got you excited about that company? I like to look at my local list. So whether it's like, in DC, the Washingtonian magazine, the best places to work, whether it's Glassdoor or a domain-specific list of companies, I think these are just great lists that profile organizations, and it might trigger something that you want your employer to have. Not saying that you need to work at those companies, but it's an easy curated place to start your search. And it's a lot less overwhelming than looking at the hundreds of other employers, maybe where you live, or even across the country if you don't even know where you want to live. So look at these companies, go on LinkedIn, look at them at Glassdoor, see what people are saying about them, what they say about themselves, what others are saying about them. And don't forget to write down those kind of companies that you're interested in and just kind of keep them as a kind of a running target. Next, start looking at the actual positions at the companies that might be of interest to you. See kind of what skills those people have who are in those roles. Maybe there might be a certification you might need. This is a good way for you to start kind of building the skills that you might need ahead of time. And we'll dive more into that next. And then last, start researching individuals in the role you want and the companies you look for. Oh, I'm sorry, look at identified job descriptions. So just start identifying, you've identified roles and start just finding places that, or job descriptions that interest you. And a lot of job boards have a save feature. So definitely recommend just kind of tagging that. And then they all have like this AI and automation that they'll start sending you jobs like the ones you're saving. So they'll actually do a lot of the work for you, which is, saves you a lot of time as well. So that's the end of the exploration phase. So if you have any questions, put them in the question box and I will address them at the end of the presentation. Again, my name is Jenny Hux. You can find me on LinkedIn. Now Amy is going to walk you through the resume development phase.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So next, as Jenny mentioned, we're going to talk about the resume development phase. And this is really about telling your story. So remember, your resume is a marketing document. It is not your autobiography. So a resume should not include every single detail from every single job or be a complete history start to finish. So as you move from job to job in your career, it is very important to keep a detailed documented list of all of your accomplishments, your skills, your projects, volunteer experience, keywords, etc. But that doesn't have to be on your resume. That way you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you have this information somewhere, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you are looking for a change. So let's start with talking about a strategy for managing this complete history. So on the screen, you'll see an example of a living document that can be used to track key accomplishments. So putting something like this in place will really help you with both self-assessments as well as pulling together your resume. So every time you have a new accomplishment, it's pretty easy to go in and add a new line and add that list at the moment you do something so that you don't lose track of it. You might say to yourself, well, I'm going to remember what I did in this role 5 years ago. But when reality sets in and you're thinking 10 years ago, you're not going to remember the specifics of that role or the specifics of a project. Believe me when I say that. So definitely write it down so that you have somewhere that you can go back if you need to look at something in your history and pull that into your resume. A few examples or a few items to think about. This will really help you, as I said, highlight skills that match experience requested on the job posting. So if you go in and you look at your skills and you see that the job posting has a specific skill that even you used 5 years ago, then you can look at, okay, this is what I did 5 years ago, and this is how that relates to what they're looking for. And you never know when an interviewer or a recruiter is going to pick something obscure on your resume and ask you a question about it. Anything on your resume is fair game. So if they ask you a question about it and you can't speak to it eloquently, that might be a red flag for them, and that might get you rejected from a job. Another important item to mention is that you should really keep track of any experience that may translate to a future role, whether that's professional experience or volunteer experience. So for example, let's say that you're the treasurer of your PTA at your school, or you're the treasurer at the homeowners association. You've likely gained skills that are transferable to the business world in these roles, even though these are volunteer opportunities. It's important to highlight those. Okay, now let's talk about resume best practices. Obviously, as Jenny mentioned, we're looking at this from our lens, and our lens tends to be the consulting world. So if you ask 5 different recruiters from 5 different industries, you may hear different perspective on these things. First and most important, think about the audience when you're writing your resume. Most likely, the first person that's going to look at your resume is going to be a recruiter who sees hundreds of other applicants for the same role. Large companies generally have what we call ATS systems, or applicant tracking systems. Those ATS systems can be set up to immediately sort resumes based on a specific criteria. So for example, if my job requires someone has a PhD, I can set up a filter to automatically reject every candidate who doesn't meet that minimum requirement. And then I'm left with the resumes that do match that requirement in the screen that I see. The recruiter is likely going to give your resume a 7 to 30 second glance. Think about that for a second. 7 to 30 seconds. That is not a lot of time. So based on this glance, that's how you'll end up in the yes pile or in the no pile. And you want that first few seconds to really count. And you want your resume to end up in the yes pile. So a couple of things to help your resume catch the recruiter's attention. Number one, for me, first and foremost, make sure it's easy to read. If it's difficult to read and I'm spending 10 seconds per resume, I'm quickly scanning for a few key things. If the resume is difficult to read or if the format just doesn't make sense to my brain, that could land you in the no pile or in the reject pile. I'm a big fan of bulleted resumes. I honestly hate reading paragraphs upon paragraphs about your role, and it's really hard to kind of suss out what specifically you've done if I have to read through a lot of words to get there. Read and reread your resume. It is such an important thing to make sure that you don't have typos or make sure that you're consistent in using grammar tenses. It just shows your attention to detail. It's also a great idea to have someone else read it. Oftentimes your brain skips right over that incorrect word or right over that misspelling because you've looked at this document a million times. We've all done it. We've written something, looks great to us, we send it out, and as soon as we hit send, we're like, oh, I used the wrong word. Someone with a fresh set of eyes may catch a mistake that you've overlooked time and time again. Go to the next page, Jenny. Chronological resumes tend to transfer over quicker and better to the applicant tracking system, better than functional resumes. And we'll talk about the difference between chronological and functional resumes shortly. Another way to get your resume to bubble to the top is to make sure that you've highlighted the keyword from the company's job posting to your resume. For example, if the job posting asked you for a specific software and you have that experience, make sure you put it in your resume. Even if it's the leading tool in the industry, if it's in the job posting that that's a requirement, I recommend putting it in your resume. If you don't have it in the resume, the recruiter may assume that you haven't used that tool and may reject you because of that. I'm not suggesting, obviously, like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office or those types of things. But again, if you're applying for a specific receptionist role or administrative role, those might be something that you have to have experience with. Last, a resume is a starting point for a conversation. So give the recruiter enough detailed information to pique their interest, but let's save the nitty-gritty details for the actual interview. Now let's talk about resume best practices for formatting. Again, there's several schools of thought here on appropriate length. We think that a 2-page resume is absolutely fine as long as you have relevant information on it. Obviously, it depends on your length of experience. It depends on what you've done, but just make sure that it's relevant experience and it's not, jobs that you've had for, the past 40 years. You may sum some of those up and you may just say, other relevant work history from X to X date, but you don't have to have every single job you've had if you've been in the workforce for 40 years. ATS systems, as I said, have a really hard time reading functional resumes. They also have a really hard time reading columns and tables. So we highly recommend that you don't use columns and tables. It may make your resume look pretty, but if that resume comes over in mumbo jumbo in the recruiting system, the recruiter may get frustrated and may not be able to read what you're trying to say when the resume is scraped into that applicant tracking system. Some other best practices, leave out color and graphics. It's really unnecessary unless maybe you're a graphic designer or applying for an artist type of position. Photos and headshots. These are a no-no. Honestly, I cringe when I get a resume that has a photo on it. Any other personal information and affiliations, leave those out as well. You don't need to talk about your kids or your spouse in your resume. None of this is relevant to marketing yourself for the new job. This is really a document about you and about your skills and your history. Now, if you're like the speech pathologist in California who trained her dog Stella to communicate using words, or if you volunteered in the last humanitarian crisis, those are things worth highlighting in an About Me section. They pique your interest. They may get you in the yes pile. Otherwise, those personal details specifically about yourself, I would keep them off the resume. A few other things to think about. Talk about yourself like you're a human. Lose the jargon. Remember, someone on the other end is just like you. They're reviewing your resume and they want to read it like this is another person, and they want to think about you as a person when they're reading it. Don't include cliche words on your resume skills section. Everyone can put that they're hardworking or detail-oriented or passionate. Those to me are just wasted space. Instead, make sure you speak to those skills in your bullets. Make sure that you show them how you demonstrated those skills, not just saying, hey, I'm hardworking. Last and very important, remove company-specific acronyms, tools, or project names. While everyone at their company may know what the Fuzzy Bunny project is all about, the recruiter on the other end has no clue what you're talking about. One mistake that is really we see very often with candidates is that candidates will focus on their duties of the job versus the results that they had or the impact that they have. So don't just put words on your resume and expect the recruiter to take your word for it that you have these skills. Again, kind of going back to that, hey, I'm hardworking. Okay, well, how do I know that you're hardworking? The recruiter really wants to understand how you demonstrated those types of skills. So before you begin writing your resume, consider what your value proposition is. How did you stand out from the competition? What is going to make you different from that other candidate that they were just reading the resume for? What did you do that brought value to your team, your department, your company? What would past supervisors say is your key accomplishment? And if you're not sure of your past accomplishments, ask yourself, ask your coworkers or your former managers, what are you most proud of in the time that you were there? Hey, I helped the region grow by 250% in the first 3 years that I was in the role. That's something to be proud of. What did others who were in the same role not do that you were able to do? You were able to put things in processes and procedures in place to streamline the operation. That's something to be proud of. And when you left, what would your supervisor, what would other people say or remember you for? They'd remember me because they know that I was able to find people that not only had the skills to fit the company, but also had the company culture. And that's something that it's more of a cultural fit than a skill fit that what's on paper. So let's put this to practice with the next example. So the original section served as a receptionist answering phones and checking visitors in, planned and organized events. Doesn't really give me a whole lot to go on. It doesn't talk to any of the key roles or any of the responsibilities, and honestly, it's a little underwhelming, just a little meh. In reality, this person is truly the face of the organization. They support the office needs. They support vendor management, multiple special projects throughout the year, and most importantly, they're responsible for planning all the fun events for the company. The revised statement shows you the why. Why is this person so vital to the organization? What is the impact he or she made? Read that revised statement for a second. This statement says, this person is the face of the organization. This person is Julie, the cruise director, making sure that everyone has what they need and everything is running smoothly. For those of you who have no idea what I mean, I've just dated myself. You can Google the 70s reference. You also have given me some figures in this second revised statement. So now I understand the scope and the impact of what you had. Recruiters also read into what a candidate might be like based on what's written in the resume. For example, the person who wrote the original resume section, they sound like they might be the kind to do their job. They maybe don't have any passion. It just seems like they're kind of unexcited about the job themselves. But the second statement, the revised statement, that sounds like someone who's excited. They're excited to contribute. They want to come in. They want to make an impact. It really makes me want to read more. It really makes me want to talk to that person. And really, that's the type of person that I want in my organization. So we recommend, on the next page, we recommend putting a summary on the top of your resume. So the summary serves as an elevator pitch Again, this is something that should be very brief. It's not a book. Again, it's not an autobiography. This is just the brief little snippet about you. This is where you should tell the recruiter what it is that you're trying to do, especially if you're making a pivot in your career or your job that you have is different from the ones that you've had. The job that you're seeking is different than the ones that you've had in the past. Okay, let's check out the sample that we've modified on the next page. The original summary says, seeking a challenging management position that combines current technology with growth challenges. You would be surprised how many resumes say something like this that's extremely vague. It doesn't tell you a lot. Honestly, it's just taking up some space on your resume, but it's not giving any additional value to you as a candidate. I have no idea what you want to do after I read this, so I'm definitely not sold that you're like a great candidate for me. But if you update that statement, you talk about that you're highly motivated operations and project management professional. That says to me, okay, they've maybe have their PMP. You've got a master in organizational leadership. Great. It gives me more details to go on to tell me a little bit about you. And as a recruiter, I might not have the easiest time picking out from your resume why you're a fit for the job that I'm looking at you for. But if you have something in the summary that tells me, hey, this is why I'm a good fit for this job, especially if you're making a pivot in your career, then I don't have to go digging to your resume to go, okay, under the second bullet, this person said this, under the fifth bullet, they said this. Oh, if I put them together, they're obviously, have great transferable skills and they're obviously a match for us. I want you to pull that together in the summary statement to tell me, hey, this is why I'm applying for this job. This is why you should take a look at me. So that's your brief, short intro. Okay, so let's move on to the elephant in the room, addressing gaps in your resume. So there are two types of resumes. So we're going to talk about the functional resume and the chronological resume. So chronological resumes, as I said, applicant tracking systems tend to do better with these, and these are definitely going to serve you better in most cases. Chronological resumes generally list your accomplishments from each position that you held, and the positions are listed by date with the most recent first. So the other type of a resume is a functional resume. This is also called a skills-based resume. So functional resumes place the focus on your skills and your areas of expertise rather than the specific jobs or details of your work history. So the problem with functional resumes is that they're often a red flag for a recruiter. I read somewhere that a functional resume is like saying, hey, I'm trying to divert your attention away from the gap in my resume. Oftentimes when we see functional resumes, it feels like it's a candidate trying to hide something. So I don't particularly love functional resumes. Just don't try to fool the person. Be honest. I say own it. If you've been out of the workforce doing other things, there's nothing wrong with that. And if a company sees something wrong with that, then maybe it's not the right company for you. Also, don't try to change your resume or give yourself a title or use words that make it seem like you've been working when you in reality have not been working in the workforce. Things like domestic engineer or operations manager. I say just own it. You've taken time off to focus elsewhere. That's completely okay. You don't have to have a bunch of bullets talking about the gap. But if you have relevant volunteering experience or you've gained skills during that time, absolutely bring those to the front. An important thing to keep in mind, and think about this just in life in general, but from a recruiter's perspective, there's never a perfect candidate. The perfect candidate rarely exists. Every candidate has something that's not ideal. So job hopping, lack of degree, gaps in resumes, layoff, maybe they're overqualified. Just be honest. Give them enough information to address the question, show them how you've overcome hurdles in your past, and just own it and be prepared to speak about it confidently. You've done nothing wrong. Again, as Jenny said, I think it's 1 out of 4 people have taken time off to stay home with a family member. Okay, so now we have your resume nearly finished. We've walked through the gaps in your resume. Let's move on to the next session, updating your LinkedIn profile. So it's important that your profile is up to date on LinkedIn. LinkedIn uses algorithms to pull relevant information. And as Jenny mentioned, they'll pull information to help you with the job search as long as you have your information filled out on LinkedIn. Recruiters are 14 times more likely to reach out to you if you have a photo versus no photo. Just make sure it's a professional photo. And I'm not suggesting that you have to go out and get a professional headshot done, not at all. Just make sure that it's appropriate and it conveys the image that you want to convey. I can't tell you how many things that look like selfies or photos with someone's head cut out or really bad glamour shots that we've seen that make us laugh, but don't necessarily make us want to contact that person. Make sure you set up your search filters in LinkedIn to your advantage. List that you're looking, list the region that you're looking, list what types of opportunities you're looking for, full-time, part-time, or internships. If you're looking for a specific industry or looking for a specific skill, make sure you put that. Also, one piece of advice that I have is if you're looking in a different regional area, so let's say that you currently live in Arizona, but you want to live in Seattle. If I'm a recruiter in Seattle and I see your Arizona resume or your Arizona address, that to me puts up a red flag and makes me think, I may have to pay to relocate this person here. That may end you up in the reject pile if the company doesn't have funds to relocate people. So you may want to change your resume address to show that you're currently in Seattle or that your goal is to relocate at a specific date. Okay, it can definitely be frustrating to break in after time away. It's always good to upskill in that time that you have stepped away. So look for opportunities to add tools to your skill set and to make yourself more marketable. Even if you're not working in an industry job, you can still be developing skills that will help you be more marketable. There are a ton of resources available and they vary in price. Some are even free. One of the positive things to come out of COVID, and there aren't many, but one of the positive things is that a lot of big conferences have gone virtual, and some are even offering content for free. So you may be able to attend a big organization event for free or see some content online that generally would cost you thousands of dollars to attend and a week out of work. Look into these types of programs online that can help you hone new skills and make you more marketable for future employers. Watch webinars. Look at certifications. They're a great way to gain a new skill. It's also a great way to have a third party validate that you have the skills in your tool belt that you're saying that you have. LinkedIn has an event section that has some really good information. A lot of podcasts are free. A lot of blogs are free. Meetups are a great place for both networking and also skill building. So a lot of organizations, one I'm thinking of locally is DAMA, the Data Management Association. They bring speakers into their meetings to talk on various topics. We've had a number of candidates come to us that our employees have met at those DAMA weekly meetings. So definitely go to those types of meetings or attend them virtually even. You might ask, well, how do I know what skill I need to add or what skill needs to be applicable for this new job or this new industry? So on the next page, we recommend that you research job ads to see what companies are looking for. We do the same thing when we have new postings. The first thing we'll do is we'll go out to LinkedIn and we'll find out how other companies are writing ads. We'll find out what types of candidates are in these types of roles, what certifications they have. So that's something you absolutely can do as well. Another approach is to look for people on LinkedIn. For you as a candidate, go to LinkedIn, look at people who are in the job that you're interested in having. This can be a really great starting point for figuring out, okay, how do I get myself in that type of a role? We shared this with a coworker. I have to share that it's a little humorous. We shared it with a coworker and she said, oh, isn't that a little creepy or a little stalkerish? And honestly, no, it's not. It's something that we do all the time. We're not suggesting that you reach out to everyone that you look at. We're just saying, look at their resume, look at their profile. There might be gaps that you have in your resume that you can say, okay, cool, I see that they took this type of training and then they went into a different type of role. Use LinkedIn really as a reference tool for yourself. Another thing that you can do to build your skills and build your network is listening to podcasts, reading blogs, or reading about the industry so that you can be able to speak to new skills or what's going on in the industry. This can do very well for you when you're interviewing. So now you're ready to get the word out there that you're looking for a job. How do you do this? Well, technically, you have to build a network before you can utilize it. So how can you do that? Earlier, you identified target companies that you're interested in. Now it's time to see if you have any connections there. Get in touch with former colleagues, look at alumni groups, look at volunteer organizations, see if there are any leads for you there. See if any of your former colleagues or managers will endorse you on LinkedIn. Find groups on LinkedIn that have like-minded individuals. Find meetups that have like-minded individuals. Volunteer your time on projects. We found some great resources on being able to volunteer for nonprofits who are looking to have someone who has a lot of different skills. It's not just technical skills, but sometimes they need someone who has an organizational management and change background. So you can volunteer your time, and sometimes it's even just in hour chunks, and that can be something that you put on your resume for the gap. Go to local community meetups, as I said. Another thing you can do is you can reach out to your former college placement center. A lot of these services are starting to offer services for alumni instead of just working with current students who are looking for internships or looking for jobs. Attending webinars like the one today can also be helpful in building your network. You probably never knew of CELA or what we did before this meetup, but this can give you a network. And now if you ever have questions or you know someone that is interested in CELA, you can say, hey, I know them. I went to that webinar once. Reach out to people who influence you on LinkedIn and ask them to do an informational interview with them. I had a candidate who was retiring from the military and wasn't getting a whole lot of traction. One of the things that I recommended for him was look at the list of people that he knew at the targeted companies and see other people who came out of the military and reach out to them. People love talking about themselves. They love talking about the role that they're doing. And most of the time, people are open to spending 15 to 30 minutes with you. Tell your family and your friends that you're looking as well. Even if they're not in the workforce, you never know. Aunt Susie might have gone to college with someone who's now a CEO and she can make an introduction. As Mr. Rogers says, always look for the helpers. So once you've got your resume ready for the prime time, it's time to get out there. There are several places to find jobs and post your resume. LinkedIn is probably one of the main sources used by recruiters, but there are also a lot of local job boards, industry boards, or domain-specific boards, such as like the Data Management Association and those types of things. So we're going to do a quick poll. Jenny's going to get that up in a minute. So take a quick minute to vote. We'd love to see the percentages on the screen of what your favorite job board is. And if you don't see one that you're typically using, please feel free to add that to the chat. Okay, everyone get their vote in. Okay, let's see, Jenny, the results.
Great. Not sure if you guys can see these or not, but we have 64% of people using LinkedIn, 27% using Indeed, and 9% using
9% using what, Jenny?
dice.com.
Okay.
It's like kind of our technical roles.
Absolutely. Sorry, you cut out.
It's technical roles. And then if you have other boards you guys like to do, go ahead and add them to the chat. That might be helpful for other people.
Great. And last, I'm going to talk to you about returnship programs. So returnship programs are something that were fairly new to me as well. It seems to be gaining momentum with a lot of companies. These are generally open to people who've taken a career break for several years. They generally last from 8 to 6 months, and then they're able to return, refresh their skills, and the organization can evaluate them as employees, and they can both gauge whether it's a good long-term fit. So a lot of companies are starting to offer returnship programs, and that might be another way to look at re-entering the workforce. I'm going to hand this over now to Allie, who's going to talk to you about interviewing.
All right, so we've made it to the next phase of the job search process where you'll be talking presumably to a live human being and kind of start to get a better feel for the opportunity as well as about the company. So in this section, I'll cover best practices, how to evaluate opportunities, and how to best prepare for those on-site or virtual interview panels. So before getting in front of anyone, you'll likely be put into the applicant tracking system as either an applicant or via a referral if you know someone who's at the company. Typically after that, you'll have a 30 to 45-minute phone screen with a recruiter to get a better feel for the opportunity, and they can also get an idea of what it is exactly you're looking for. Maybe it's this role that you're talking about or a different role that's maybe you don't know about at the company. Next would typically be either an on-site interview pre-COVID with a handful of folks, or in today's world, a virtual interview panel. And then finally is the negotiations and the offer stage. Again, as Jenny said, we're looking at it from the lens of CELA. This is our typical interview process, but I'd encourage all candidates to ask the recruiter in their first initial phone conversation what a typical interview process looks like. How many people will you be expected to meet with? What's the interview format? Is it all in one day, or is it spread out over a handful of days? Will there be any test cases you'll be expected to do? And most importantly, when is the hiring manager expected to make a decision? And you'll see in the bottom corner, I think it's a really good idea to keep a track of all the applications that you've submitted, whether that's in an Excel sheet or a separate inbox of your email, or just using an old-fashioned pen and paper. This allows you to track those individual timelines as well as keep track of how many irons you may have in the fire at any given time. So next, I want to talk about different types of recruiters. And this isn't widespread knowledge. I think people like to lump recruiters into one bucket category, but there really are two different types of recruiters. Agency or third-party recruiters are hired by bigger corporations, and by way of that, likely know less about the day-to-day culture of the company that they're trying to place candidates at. Typically, these recruiters have a higher volume and serve multiple clients across multiple industries, and their pay structure is different. So they're paid a commission for their direct placements, meaning that oftentimes they may be pushing to find their candidates employment, whether or not they're the best cultural fit. And in some cases, you may be quote unquote locked out and cannot apply for any job at a company for 6 to 12 months after a recruiter submits your resume there. On the flip side, the company, if you were placed by a recruiter, they may not be able to directly hire you without paying that agency a fee. So be sure when you're working with a third party or agency recruiter to ask about any hidden clauses or these specific questions that may put you on a do not hire list by that specific company. The other type of recruiter that I want to talk about is an internal recruiter. They cover the internal hiring needs of a single company. So when you're working with an in-house recruiter directly, your price tag is of course lower because there's no recruiting fee on top of the salary that you'd be placed at. And these recruiters are typically focused on hiring for quality and company fit against those company mission and values, rather than trying to quote unquote put butts in seats. A pro tip, there's so many free websites and ad boards that Amy mentioned in the previous slides where you can post your resume for free. So your red flag warning should immediately go up if you're being asked to pay a recruiter or any website to post your resume. Important to know, no matter what type of recruiter you work with, I like to think generally they want to find the best fit for that candidate or maybe their client or company. But important to be transparent with the recruiter so that they can best help you. So for example, if you're looking for a role that has flexibility between working from home and working in the office, don't be afraid to share that with the recruiter early on that this may be important to you. And treat the conversation with the recruiter as a networking opportunity. As Amy said, you don't know who may turn into a lifelong connection or can open some new doors for you down the road. So if you aren't already connected with the recruiter on LinkedIn, definitely encourage you to do so after the phone screen or interview process by sending a personalized note via LinkedIn asking to connect. So we've submitted our applications and we got that exciting email asking for our availability to chat. So how do we best prepare for it? Inevitably, in some form, you'll be asked to tell the employer about yourself, whether it's in the phone screen, during the interview process or panel, or in both. I saw a quote about this question as I was preparing for this, and I thought it was so fitting. This question is loved because it's predictable and feared because it is excruciatingly open-ended. So as you think about this question and how you sell yourself, use this question kind of as a way to set the stage and let it serve as an icebreaker. Choose a couple of concrete accomplishments and show how these achievements or skills will have a positive impact. Important to practice this out loud. There's a fine line between pitching your skills and being a used car salesperson. So practice in front of a mirror while you're driving in the car, on a walk. These are things we recommend as they really do, practice makes perfect, and they help you nail down your pitch. And remember, don't use this elevator spiel of yours to talk about the company and all of the great things that you've researched about the company. There will certainly be time for that later in the interview process. Remember, this is an opportunity to sell yourself and make the team want to pull you in and help them contribute to the company's success. Another good thing we like to say for the preparation stage is looking at the company core values and mission and speaking to how you may align and how your core values may align is another good strategy. I know Amy and I, as recruiters at Sela, and Jenny before she moved into the marketing space, looked for folks who aligned with our core values. Are they active collaborators? Will they work to develop authentic relationships with our clients? Those are huge for us, and looking up those core values ahead of time and how you can best prepare your answers to tailor to those is a great strategy. And again, be prepared to speak to those red flags or gaps in your resume. Don't be bashful doing so. And with anything, practice makes perfect. So practice a talk track describing what you did during your resume gap beforehand will help build confidence as you prepare to talk about that. One of the most popular types of interview questions are the behavioral questions. So this is where a recruiter or hiring manager will ask you a question looking at your past behaviors in a way to predict future behavior and how you may succeed at their company. So the STAR method is a way to answer these questions in a straightforward format. Again, there's so many resources online. We pulled this STAR template from the web, but it's a good way to kind of practice and having a concrete example for when these questions arise. They often have telltale openings and are typically easy to recognize. So tell me about a time when, give me an example of. So say for sake of argument, you're looking for a sales role. Tell me about a time when you dealt with a difficult customer. So let's break it down. STAR is the acronym that stands for the situation. So you'll set the scene and give the necessary details of your example. They'll then describe T, the task, what your responsibility was in that situation. Were there challenges? Were there deadlines? Were there constraints? The action, explain exactly what it was you did and what steps you took to address it. And then the result, share the outcomes of your actions. And ideally, this would be a positive result. If you lost the company money, definitely find a different example to share. But whether it's in a mock interview or just practicing, again, your answer in the mirror, talk through your response so that it feels natural and more comfortable. So it comes across that way when you're actually presenting such in the interview. So talking about a phone screen, you'll typically have this with the recruiter and use this as an opportunity to build rapport with the recruiters. They're generally your cheerleaders throughout the process, and they're typically your main point of contact. So don't burn the bridge with them. Look at it as a way to expand your network. Always good rule of thumb to do some quick research on the company in advance, especially if you apply. You'd be surprised how many folks apply, and when I ask them, what drew you into SELA, they don't have an answer. And it was, oh, it was just another application and looking for a job. So even having a prepared answer, I saw something on the website. I really love the company culture from what I read on Glassdoor. These are ways that show you did your homework. And show that you're not just mass applying to different companies. On the flip side of the coin, use the phone screen as a way to interview your recruiter too. Ask them about their experience working at the company, what it is that they like about working there, what drew them in, and ask them to talk a little bit about the company culture. If they can rattle off a few things that they like, this will likely tell you a lot about the company culture and maybe some social or volunteer events that you can expect if you join the company. And finally, you should be prepared to discuss your requirements, whether it's salary, work from home, commute. Those types of things are likely to come up in this conversation. Salary is always a difficult subject to discuss, but employers in many states, Washington being one of them, increasingly, I think there are very few states that are allowed to ask outright what your salary is. It's now illegal, so they'll likely be asking what your expectations might be. So be transparent about your requirements and absolutely do your research ahead of time, finding out about similar roles with commensurate experience. So for example, if you're looking for an office coordinator role in Seattle, do some market research beforehand using either PayScale or Glassdoor to see what that going market rate is. This will ensure that you're not selling yourself short or throwing out an arbitrary number that's way out of range. So moving on, as you prepare for either the on-site or virtual interview, congratulations, you've moved along in the process. And at this point, you should know what your interview process will look like after asking your recruiter about it in the phone screen. Typically, they'll either send you a list of names in an email or give you a heads up of who you'll be speaking with next. I'd encourage you to look these folks up on LinkedIn. Maybe don't send an immediate request to connect, but use it as a way to gather more research on the company and as well as a connection point. Maybe they are in a similar networking group, or maybe they even went to the same undergraduate university that you did. It's a great way to prepare for those icebreaker conversations, as well as get more intel about the company. Also be prepared to talk about why you're excited about the role. Get smart about the company. Maybe they have a blog on their website. Maybe there are company videos that give you a sense of what the company culture might look like. This is a great way to prepare, as well as curate some questions to ask during your interview process. And just as you would keeping your social media private and having a professional photo on LinkedIn, remember, recruiters are master sleuths and we pride ourselves on such. Please keep your social media presence either private or professional. It's likely that your recruiter or hiring manager or someone on the team will have Googled you or tried to find any information out ahead of time. So it's a good idea to always Google yourself to see what information is available for folks to see. Be mindful. So some potential interview questions for the employer. Of course, there are so many good resources online for questions that you can ask during the interview process, but this is really your time to flip the script and interview them to make sure you're making the right decision. A lot of interviews build in time for either an informal lunch or a tour around the office as well, as kind of a way to give you a sense of what working at the company might look like. But if they don't, maybe ask at the end of your question and interview process if they could give you a tour to provide a sense of the space that you might be working in. A few interview tips. So just like you're taking time out of your day to interview, interviewers are taking time away from their work. So it's important to be professional and on time. In terms of your attire, make sure it's, dressing for the part that you want is a good rule of thumb. And if you aren't sure what to wear and maybe the company appears more casual, always ask the recruiter. In case it's a long day of interviews and there maybe isn't a known break, encourage you to pack a snack and water so that you can keep the hunger away and be, present and mindful in moving forward in the process and having articulate answers. One thing that I always look for when I'm talking with folks, either in the phone screen or on site, is if they have any questions for me. So make sure you have prepared questions. And if your questions were answered in the process, make sure you let the interviewer know, oh, I did have a question about X, but we already discussed it. This way it shows that you were still prepared and did come prepared with questions. But again, a good rule of thumb is if they've answered all your questions, always ask them about their experience at the company. As Amy said, folks love to chat about themselves, and I'm sure someone could easily rattle off, what it is they like about working at the company. Again, the interview process is just as much the company interviewing you as it is you interviewing the company and making sure it's the right fit for both parties involved. So when you're looking for your next job, make sure you're interviewing them on the company culture as well to make sure this seems like a good fit for you. Do they have different professional development opportunities you're interested in? How do their company events look? Do they have a strong volunteer program? If those things are important to you, this is your time to ask. So we are moving on to the decision section, always an exciting stage of the process. I'm going to cover some best practices and how to work through offers and negotiations. So if you're going to get the pay you deserve and not sell yourself short, it's crucial to know the going rate for your position in your specific industry and in your specific geographic region. So websites like PayScale and Glassdoor are free to join and can kind of help you determine these numbers. Really encourage everyone to look at kind of all elements of a compensation package that can affect kind of your standard of living, quality of life. Does the company have good vacation benefits, stock options, bonuses? What does their education reimbursement plan look like? And are there remote and flexible work options? I suspect many companies going forward have many more flexible and remote opportunities than they did perhaps a year ago. So all important things to consider beyond just the salary number. So we've all been there, we've interviewed successfully, and now we're waiting patiently, or maybe not so patiently, for that recruiter to reach out with the decision. So when you're leaving the either on-site interview or virtual interview, be sure to ask the recruiter or hiring manager when you can expect to hear from them about a decision. This will help level set for you and not drive yourself crazy. And if a few days have gone by without hearing from someone, feel comfortable reaching back out to the recruiter for an update. Send thank you notes or thank you emails if you're not interested. It may sound antiquated, but they really do go a long way. And we have hiring managers at CELA who, anytime they get a follow-up thank you note from a candidate, they always stop by and let us know and say, that was really sweet, and they went above and beyond. So it doesn't go without notice. And negotiations. Know going into this negotiation stage what you're willing to flex on. Maybe if the company can't flex on salary, they could flex on maybe a sign-on bonus, extra vacation days. And another but big intangible benefit is, what does the growth look like at the company? So make sure you have a plan for what you're negotiating for, and don't try and nickel and dime the company on every aspect. That might burn a bridge in the process. And remember, it's likely not the recruiter's decision to give extra money. If it were, I think that would be too easy. Recruiters generally want to find the best fit for their company, but also for the candidate. So maybe, if you went through the interview process and realized maybe this isn't the right company culture, or maybe this isn't the right role for me, be candid and let the recruiter know early in the process, in case they maybe need to pivot, and this will allow them time to find extra time to find additional candidates. All right, so we've thrown a lot of information at you, and want to thank everyone for their time in joining. I know we ran a little past an hour. Again, with all this information, we will follow up with a link of the recording of this webinar. So if you want to listen again as you practice writing your resume or getting prepared for certain stages of the interview process, you'll be able to do so. We know everyone will be off to great things and look forward to meeting and working with you on that resume help. And the resources slide will also be sent via email. Here are some of the resources that we used when we were compiling this webinar together. The strength finders would encourage everyone to go through and at least maybe find your core strengths if you haven't done so already. I think that's a great jumping off point. Some free blogs and podcasts are there at the bottom, as well as books. And then on the next page, this is a list of skill-based volunteering opportunities that Amy was talking about earlier that may serve as a foot in the door, something you can look at as a networking opportunity or another volunteering opportunity to add to your resume. These are ones that we've researched and are starting to use at CELA. There's so many out there though, so I encourage you to look this up if this is something you're interested in, maybe part-time or as you're looking to add skills to your tool belt. And for those who are interested in taking us up on the resume review and LinkedIn review, as Jenny mentioned at the beginning of this, when you're ready, send your resume to recruiting@celasg.com. And then we'll send a link where you can schedule time with one of us to review those things. And in case you missed all of that, all of this information will be in a follow-up email to you all, as well as the recording of the presentation will be available sometime later this week with all of this information as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny to see if we got any questions that came in throughout the webinar.
We did, and thank you everyone for kind of staying on and going through it. It was a lot of information. So one question we got was if you should still include your address on your resume if you're applying for remote roles. So I always like to know where people are, regardless if, especially because we often recruited for different offices. I might be in DC and recruiting from Seattle or Connecticut. I think it's good to know where you are. I think a lot of times people aren't even putting their addresses anymore. They might just put their location. So they might say like Arlington, Virginia or Seattle, Washington. So I think it makes sense to put maybe like your region or where you are, but maybe I don't think you need to necessarily include your address, especially if your resume, they might share your resume with somebody else, just so there's kind of an awareness there. I don't think it can hurt, especially if there's room on your resume. And then somebody else just shared, if you didn't see it in the chat, Power to Fly is another job board that somebody really likes. So it's another one you can check out. Does anyone else have any other questions? And if you don't, you can also send questions to recruiting@celasg.com. If you want to direct it to, I'm Jenny, I did the first section, and then Amy did the second section, and Allie did the last. So you can direct questions to recruiting@celasg.com, or again, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can just search on CELA if you can't remember our names. So any other questions? Great. Perfect. So we got another question, just that it was useful and practical and reassuring over the last year, right? So this has been 2020 was crazy, right? So whether you chose to take 2020 off or did not choose it personally, there's hope and future coming in 2021. So great. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, you'll see an email probably from us tomorrow with all the resources, some handouts, and information about scheduling your resume review session. So thank you so much. Have a great day.